Okay, so we should be good to go in just about 30 seconds. It's just doing it now. Just working on a bit of a slow computer. Okay, we are live. So hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Amanda and I'm Deputy Editor at Professional Beauty. Tell us where you're watching from today, how you're doing, how you're feeling, comment in the chat box. But today we're going to be talking about practical advice on how to reopen your salon with confidence, and this session is sponsored by Dermalogica. So as you anticipate opening the doors in your service business, obviously there's excitement to get back in touch with customers, but there's still a lot to consider too, from which services you should offer, considering the social distancing measures, and also if that is going to change potentially, and how to deliver them safely using PPE and enhanced hygiene protocols, as well as preparing and equipping your staff to work effectively while feeling safe. So there's a lot to consider. So today we're joined by Dermalogica's education ambassadors, Candice, Gardner and Lesley, Corridan, who you can see, and they're going to be talking through all of this, as well as why your communication strategy to customers will be paramount. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll have a 15-minute segment to do a Q&A with the audience. So while you're watching this presentation, if you have any burning questions for Lesley and Candice, pop them in the chat box on Zoom, pop them in the comment box on Facebook, and I will collate as many as I can and get them to answer as many as they can at the end. Just before we get going, I just want you to know that Dermalogica has a clean touch certificate, which all skin therapists can complete, and this includes non-Dermalogica stockists, and it's free training on the brand's new principles of enhanced service safety. So everyone who learns these principles will become Dermalogica Clean Touch certified, and that means that you promise to uphold the brand's highest standards in safety and sanitation. So if you are interested in doing this, I'm going to post a link in the comment box and you can go and do that. But for now, I'll hand over to Lesley and Candice. I'll let them share all their knowledge, and then I will come back at the end to do the Q&A. But thank you so much, Lesley and Candice, for joining us. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself a little bit more just before you start the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Amanda. Hello, everybody. I'm Candice Gardner. Super great to see everybody joining from all around. So hi to people from Dublin and Republic of Ireland, as well as everybody who's here in the UK. That's super brilliant of you to join us today. My name is Candice Gardner, and as Amanda said, I am an education manager with Dermalogica. I've been with Dermalogica for over 20 years and actually working in industry for around 27 years. And my passion is, skin and the practical application of skincare. So as I say, as an education manager for Dermalogica, I really look after most of our training and curriculum content that we deliver across the UK and Ireland. And I support on lots of other industry bodies around all sorts of things, from training awards to looking at how we advance standards in industry. So that's me. I'll let Les introduce herself.
Hi everybody. As Candice said, super excited to be able to share some of our learnings from the last few weeks on helping our Dermalogica accounts and also our own stores get prepared for moving into sort of what will be our new normal. So much like Candice, I've been with Dermalogica around 20 years now, and as their education manager for really training, I sort of oversee how we execute the delivery of our education through our various channels of distribution. So I have a fabulous team of people that I work closely with that supports in making sure that we really deliver our education to the highest standard. And that our education makes a difference, and it helps people create change and helps them to become better professional skin therapists, but also, if they're running their own business, stronger and more successful businesses as well. So today we wanted to, like I say, just talk to you a little bit about our top line messages and our learnings. Candice and I had this conversation earlier, and we're like, how on earth are we going to get through all this information in just half an hour? So we will certainly do our best. But what I'm going to do is, Candice, shall I share my screen and we can get started?
Perfect. So I think what we had hoped to share with you, as Lesley said, is really a top line view of where we are right now. you know, I'm sure for most of you, the frustration is real that we can't give you all the dates of when everybody's opening. Well done, Northern Ireland, and well done, Republic of Ireland, for announcing your opening dates. Super fantastic. It really helps businesses to prepare when you know what you're working towards. For England, we're certainly hoping that we get an announcement this week. There is suggestion that in the early part of this week, we're going to get some information and hopefully some guidance and some guidelines to support that. Wales and Scotland is still pending for us, so hopefully they're going to come back to us again soon with some sort of information. But we really wanted to, as Lesley said, start out with what you can do now to start the planning process. We want to cover 4 key things today. We want to look at how to get planning for opening. We want to look at some of the considerations that you need to take into view in terms of services. We want to talk a little bit about preparing staff. So if you are an owner operator, you will be inherently preparing yourself through the process of preparing your business. But if you have a team, then you need to think about how you're going to move that forward to your team and share all of your updates and changes for operation. And then you also need to be looking at your communication strategy for your customers. So how are you going to be telling your customers about what you are doing to take care of them and to put their safety as priority? So those are the things that we're going to be sort of focusing on today. And as Lesley said, you know, we are in the process of you know, sort of preparing things to support our own Dermalogica accounts and stockists, which we hope to be releasing out to them this week. And we're also preparing for our own stores to get open as well. So hopefully some of the rationale that we've used can support you in your own preparations. And we'll be happy to take some questions afterwards, as Amanda said. So Les, how about rolling forward and kicking us off?
Yeah, I think the conversation Candice and I had certainly about why this is so important is, you know, at moments you can feel quite overwhelmed with it. I know while we've been planning and talking and thinking and, you know, rationalizing everything, there has been moments where we have felt like this is too big and we don't even know where to start. But I think it's important to remember why we're doing it. And ultimately, this is about safety. It's about safety for yourselves, safety for your staff, safety for your customers, and also safety for your community. We can't operate in a community as a little island. We have to make sure that the impact we have is a positive one, and we do whatever we can to sort of mitigate that risk. I think I shared with Candice earlier, actually, and this may sound random, but I had an experience about 10 years ago in a slightly different industry. I did a course on dealing with fear of flying. And at the time, they said to us that, you know, the entire aviation industry is actually built on safety. And without safety, there would be no confidence in the aviation industry. So you certainly don't need to be nervous about flying. And that sort of, I suppose, struck a chord with me in the situation we are at the moment, because without safety at the core of what we do moving forward, we could risk losing confidence in our industry as a whole. And this isn't about brands, it isn't about independent businesses. Actually, we're all in this together to be able to continue to future-proof our industry. So we hope that the advice today is practical, and we know that at times it may feel a little overwhelming, but we want to continue to build trust in our industry and make sure that we continue to grow and all our independent businesses continue to grow and be successful businesses as well. So let's get started on, I suppose, the planning part of things. And I know, Candice, you were really integral and have been integral in being connected with what we can do while we wait for all the guidance that we need.
Yes, and I think what's been frustrating for business is that we haven't had the government guidance yet. So how do you plan when you don't know what you're planning for? That's, you know, a critical, you know, sort of question. So I think, of course, government guidance is going to be key in us understanding what we need to do. But I want to direct you also to using some other resources to help you in this planning process. First of all, to look at the professional organizations that you work with. So if you are a member of, you know, BABTAC or the National Hairdressing Beauty Federation or the Guild or FHT, it's really important that you look at those organizations and what the professional bodies have put together in terms of standards, because that's, although yes, government guidance will supersede that, it's a really good starting point in terms of starting to think about what you might need to take into consideration. And those professional organizations, trust me, have done a lot of collaboration, and many of them are actually collaborating with government to develop the guidelines. So they are the most closely connected to what is going to come out in the government guidelines. So it's worth making sure that those organizations you're working with, you know, you take on board their guidance. And I would also say that a lot of them, if you are doing your insurance through them, a lot of the insurance will be connected to how you execute those professional guidelines and standards. So your insurance will be dependent to some extent on how you're executing those safety protocols. So although there is obvious leniency for different businesses to execute in ways that's operationally practical, there is also the context of understanding your legal and professional obligations in terms of making sure that your customer is safe. And then alongside that, I would also say that, you know, the brands and suppliers that you work with, trust me, you know, all of them are working extremely hard to try and make sure that they're putting in place guidance to help you as professionals. So it's worthwhile making sure that even if you haven't had any direct contact with some of your brands, that you take the initiative and you contact them to say, have you got new protocols? Is there a new way that we should be executing something? Or are there any limitations or restrictions to using the equipment that I have from you? So your suppliers and your brands that you're working with really should have that information available. So that's the starting point, is certainly to look at that. And then once you've sort of had a review of some of those guidances and those overviews that have been given to you by various organizations and hopefully imminently by government, you can start to think about some of the practical provisions. And the first most obvious thing is around risk assessment. And as Lesley said, this is all about the safety of your staff, the safety of yourselves, safety of your customers as they come through your doors. So the first and foremost thing that you need to consider is your risk assessment. So where are the places that you have probability of increasing risk of spreading the virus? So if you were, let's say, for example, to have someone come into the business who was asymptomatic, so then where would they go? What would they touch? Where would they interact? And what is the risk of that potential cross-contamination through the business? So you have to have mitigating practices before someone even gets through the door. And then you have to have practices that come into play as you're working, you know, your way around the business and moving from area to area. So the distancing restrictions that we have in place at the moment is the 2-meter rule, that, you know, if you are, you know, with somebody, that you need to be 2 meters from them unless you are using certain types of PPE that allow you to come into closer contact. So for now, based on the 2-meter, that would be a number one thing to try and understand your premises in terms of these distancing restrictions. So, you know, if you were to look at your front door to your front desk, how much meterage is there? What is the distance? How much square foot have you got in your business that allows you to play with? If your client was sitting on a chair in your waiting area, how many people would you be able to have if you were observing 2 meters between other clients or 2 meters between your front desk staff? Would you be able to accommodate that? So if you aren't able to accommodate that, then the likelihood is you won't be able to have any waiting. So if you can't have waiting, that means you have to have appointment bookings that literally allow the client to come into the premises. And you may have to stagger bookings if you have multiple treatment rooms. So those are the types of considerations that you need to take into play when considering restrictions. And distancing restrictions are equally valid for staff. They're not just in place for your customers. So if you have staff rooms or staff areas, how do your staff maintain their distancing around the business? The other thing to look at is obviously your sanitation protocols. So, this is a norm for us as our industry. We'd like to believe that our businesses are upholding the highest safety standards and that we take great pride in our hygiene and sanitation. But it's really an opportunity for us to revisit that, make sure, and also to elevate those hygiene standards, because it's not simply about making sure that a client comes into a clean environment where we are not making them vulnerable. What we have to remember is that both staff and customers could potentially at any point be asymptomatic, but be carriers of the virus and therefore spreading it. And therefore, we need to amplify those protocols within the service and within the interaction. So it's not just about doing it before and after. You're going to see a raise of those sanitation standards right throughout the service and the interaction. And then think about what's happening with your laundry and your sundries. What things are single use, what things are laundered, and how are you changing that out and making sure that anything that's being used by a client is either being discarded or thrown away, or if it has to be reused, it's put away in a closed container in order to go away for laundering. A big factor is PPE, and I'm sure that, like all of you out there, this is the biggest headache. So what is our recommendations on PPE? We don't have guidance yet as to whether we're going to need disposable or not disposable, or we can use reusable PPE options. But I think what's important is that you're going to need PPE. So you need to be investigating the types of PPE that are available to you that you can get your hands on. The other thing that I would say is that, really think carefully about whether the PPE you are buying and introducing, because you're going to be wearing it every day and it's not the most comfortable stuff, that you really think about whether it's designed for purpose, for your purpose, is really important. So does it work for you in your environment? That's key. I know we had a lot of debate about what sorts of shields to implement. Close contact services, it's an extremely high probability that you're going to need to wear shields. So what sorts of shields do you wear? You don't want shields that you can't sanitize effectively. You don't want shields that give you a headache all day, or that have spongy foam things that get all over your makeup. So those are sorts of things that you might want to consider. And you might find that you have to get yourself in a few test models so that you can actually try them out, because a shield's no good if it sits up here and it doesn't come right down between, below your chin. So PPE is a tricky one, but you should be looking at some form of apron, you should be looking at some form of mask, and you definitely should be looking at some form of shield. And by mask, I mean some sort of mask type covering for the mouth and nose. And then as you consider these practical provisions you need for yourself and your staff and your premises, you need to then start thinking about what that looks like in terms of customers coming into the business. So what are your booking procedures going to be? How are you going to pre-screen your clients? And how are you going to do arrivals and checkouts so that you can both accommodate for distancing requirements along with issues around sanitation and hygiene and the provisions that you need to make for that. So, gosh, that was a whirlwind of a few things. Lesley, did I leave anything out? Did you have anything to include?
No, and I think it's hard to kind of give all the top line on this, because I think we need to give a little bit of context of why certain decisions are made. And I think that's the that's the long and the short of it, is we can only give you the considerations that each independent business needs to make the decision for themselves. But yeah, a lot to kind of cover there. And I'm sure we probably have some questions on it anyway. But let's move on and talk a little bit about services, shall we? And this is another consideration, is what are you actually going to offer when it comes to services? You know, are you planning to open up with your full service offering that you used to have, or are you going to limit what you're offering? What you have to remember is that every single service you offer will need an updated protocol. So it will need to have all the considerations of that extra safety, that extra hygiene, those extra steps in it. So the more services you offer, the more you will have to consider how you execute that. And I suppose in the mix there, you need to think about what is going to be popular. Is there an opportunity for you to promote a certain service that you think makes the most sense for you for lots of reasons, which I'll go on to talk about in a minute? Is there some kind of promotional service? Is there a set of post-lockdown services that your customers are screaming and shouting about? Candice and I were talking about a head-to-toe defuzzing we might need of hair removal and nails and lashes and all sorts of things, along with skincare, because skins have been going crazy during this time. So there are lots of things to think about when it comes to what you're going to offer. So don't necessarily just open up and think, I'm going to do what I did before, because there are going to be extra steps you'll have to take. And then between every single customer, you're going to have to completely sanitize that room and all your tools and all your products. So you need to allow around 20 to 30 minutes between every client to do that. And yes, as time goes by, we will become a bit more efficient, but there won't, you know, if you think about the length of your service, if you're going to offer a 15-minute service and then you have to clean for 30 minutes afterwards, it doesn't make financial sense for you. You know, is it still a profitable service for you to do for that amount of cleaning? Now, if that 15-minute service is a high-ticket service and you think actually it's really profitable for me, even though it's a shorter service, that might mean that it outweighs the idea that actually you're spending 30 minutes cleaning. But as a simple example, for our stores, one of the treatments that we've put on a back burner is a shorter 10-minute service that the therapist works face-to-face with the customer. It's called Skin Solver, and we've actually put that one slightly to the side for now, because we feel that for that 10-minute service, the amount of cleaning we'll have to do afterwards, it doesn't really weigh up for us. So it's certainly worth looking at that. And it doesn't mean that shorter services aren't important, but it might be that you only offer them as a bundle, or you only offer them if they're tagged onto something else, so that you're spending a significant amount of time with that customer. That sort of weighs up the amount of time you're spending cleaning as well. The other consideration is some businesses that have remained open during lockdown have been doing more virtual services. So you may be offering things like online classes, you know, to teach customers how to use product. You may be doing digital consultations. And we don't think these things are going away. We actually think there will still continue to be a demand for these types of virtual services. So we would highly recommend you consider how you build that into your treatment menu moving forward. And it might be, if you have a number of team members, that you can't have all staff back into the business at one point. Maybe some of the staff are manning your virtual services and the other half are coming in and doing services on site, and you're sort of rotating your staff. So that might be a consideration. And then finally, just thinking a little bit about, once you've made those decisions of what you're offering, you probably already have people saying, you know, we want to come back in for treatments. Certainly getting a waiting list going, or starting to sort of pre-book. Obviously, there's pros and cons to that. You might choose to put people into the diary and they've got a secured booking. The risk is that when announcements come up for those devolved nations that haven't necessarily had a date, you may have to move those appointments. But if you don't move them, then the good news is you've got those bookings secured. So it's just something to consider and to think about when it comes to your services. Anything to add there, Candice?
No, I think just to say, I think, Lesley, you know, the context of services and cleaning in between services, I know that this is a difficult one, and it's challenging that you're going to have to consider the diary time for it. But I think the reality is that we need customers to have the confidence, and you can't risk your customer safety or your staff safety by not following through those protocols. So it is important that you're considering that as part of your, when you open your appointment book, so that you don't compromise on that. And I suppose the next biggest thing, because that sort of links to that, is it's costly. Yep, it's costly. So we've had a lot of questions about price increases. You know, what do you do? You know, what do you do if you are implementing all this PPE and you're, costing more money with all this time allocation for sanitation and hygiene, let alone the product that takes and the fact that you've got to pay your staff to do it. Yeah, those are all considerations. And I think it's a very difficult one, and I don't think there's any straight answer, and every business needs to make a judgment based on their client base, based on where they are, and what the implications are going to be for them, because it is sensitive to increase prices when you've got lots of people concerned about the fact that their clients might be out of jobs or their clients might be having financial pressures. But at the same time, your business is no business if it's not profitable. So you have to really think carefully about where you are making potential cost savings. They might be small in comparison to the things you're outlaying, but they may, balance things out for you. So for example, it's highly likely you will not be able to offer refreshments because you're trying to minimize the amount of time that clients spend in the business waiting and hanging about. So there's no refreshments. So maybe you're going to be making a cost saving on some of that. You shouldn't be handing out paper items, whether that's leaflets or treatment menus. You should be doing as much digitally as possible, because every paper item is, a potential, risk for cross-contamination. So you may be making some savings on your print. So there may be certain areas. I know a few years ago when we actually switched from laundering to our biodegradable towels that we use, we actually made a massive cost saving in terms of becoming actually more eco-friendly as opposed to laundering all of our towels and sheets. So we use a lot of disposable laundry and linen, and that might be a route that you go, because actually it's safer, it's better, it's more hygienic, and you take away all the hassle of laundering, but at the same time you can potentially reduce your costs in that area. So whatever way you look at it, you need to think about your profitability, because you have to maintain your profitability. And the other things is to really take action sooner rather than later. You're better to go out to your customers early on and say, we're going to open our doors on X and X date. Here's our new service menu. Please be aware that obviously we've had to put lots of things into place for your protection and your safety. And this is how we're going to be charging for it. So be transparent with your customers, be open about it. But what is not advised is to open and then 6 or 8 weeks later suddenly make a price change, because that's not a great place for you or for your customers. So if you're going to delay a price increase, you're probably going to be delaying it for at least 6 to 12 months. So think carefully about that if you want to maintain that good relationship with your customers. So I think that's everything I have on price increases.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other side of it is if you know it's going to cost you more, you need to make sure that you're making allowances for that now, because you don't want to have 3 months of not running at the level of profitability that you were and have a cash flow problem. So I think you're right, Candice, as soon as possible to make that call, make that decision. And I actually think most clients and customers will understand and appreciate the situation we're in as well. So hopefully that advice helps. So let's move on and talk a little bit about preparing staff, because this has been another big consideration for us, as we have equally we have all our Dermalogica accounts, but we also have some of our own staff that we need to make sure are prepared and ready. And one of the things we have to remember is that we have a legal responsibility to make sure that we're maintaining good health and safety practices, and that we're maintaining our sanitation and hygiene standards. So that is regardless of which business, who you are, whether you're a large business, a small business, a independent individual, you have that legal responsibility. So how do you either get yourself ready or get your teams ready? And the first thing is to look at whether there is any kind of further upskilling you can do in this subject matter. So although we learn this at undergraduate level, and we like to think that we maintain those high standards, it can be easy to become a bit complacent over time. But now more than ever, we need to make sure that we have excellent sanitation and infection control, because the coronavirus is so highly contagious. So is there any way that anyone can upskill? Now, we know lots of professional skin therapists and individuals in industry have been doing things like barbicide training, which is fantastic. As Amanda mentioned earlier, Dermalogica has our Clean Touch certification, which is our enhanced service safety guidelines, which is a free 30-minute e-learning course that can help people become Clean Touch certified. And that's open to anybody in industry, and actually not just therapists. We've actively been encouraging even non-therapists that work within Dermalogica and work within our businesses to do it, because I think having an appreciation of the level of sanitization you need to do is important for everybody in the business. So if you're not executing a treatment, but you're recommending a treatment, you have to know all the steps so you can answer the questions. So think beyond just the people executing. It's anybody in your business should have that training. Independent suppliers might be doing specific training or have updated protocols. As Candice said, lots of brands are working on how this might look moving forward. Even brands that you use for their electrical technology, a lot of them have started producing some guidelines on how you might now sanitize or improve the level of sanitation that you might do with their devices. So that is definitely worth checking every single one of your suppliers for. The other thing that we've had a lot of conversation about is helping people know how to use PPE. For me, and like many of us, I've never had to use a face shield. So how do we use it? How do we sanitize it? What about a mask? How do I put a mask on? How do I take it off? How do I store that? Even down to, and we haven't listed it here, but we've looked at grooming. When you're a therapist, you should have your hair tied back if you're in uniform. You shouldn't have hair on your face that you're tempted to touch. When staff come into the business, they wear their own clothes, then they should change and put their uniform on, and then their uniform should have a separate bag. And there's so many things, even from a grooming point of view, that we need to consider. So those procedures, those protocols, both from a staff journey point of view and a client journey point of view, need to be mapped out. And one of the things we did in our stores was actually do like a little virtual tour. So the managers took a phone and they literally filmed the journey. So watch the staff do when they come in the morning, where they're going, where they're sanitizing, where they're placing their things, where are they going to in their treatment room, what do they do in their treatment room before the day starts, and literally map it out. And then the same should be for the customer. What's the customer journey, step by step by step? And I had an interesting experience this morning. I was sharing with Candice. I had an emergency dental appointment, and I got an incredible breakdown of what my journey would be at that dentist. And I think it's so reassuring as a customer to know exactly what to expect and what's expected of you. So I think that step-by-step protocol and that journey is equally important to share with the customer to help them feel secure and confident in your protocols. So I think that is really everything under preparing staff, unless Candice, you had any other thoughts or comments.
No, I was going to say you're leading me quite nicely into talking about communication, Lesley, because I think then the sort of final part to what we wanted to chat to you about today is really about how do you communicate as a business that, first of all, you're open to your customers, and then, you know, to communicate that you have put all these measures in place, because for your customers and your clients, it's really important for them to feel secure. They have to have confidence to come back to you and to have their treatments. And actually, even if they didn't feel worried initially, if they come into your business and they don't have that experience that they expect, that respects that high level of sanitation and hygiene, you risk losing them. So even if you don't, you know, even if you think that you don't need to tell them anything or do anything different because you're doing it all in the background, I would challenge you on that, because I think every customer is anticipating that there's going to be a change and they're expecting you to do something about it. So from your business perspective, it's really super important that you communicate to your customers. And the best way to give them that confidence is to share what you're doing. And as Lesley said, whether that's virtual tours, I've seen some loads of great videos actually of skin therapists sharing with their community and their teams exactly what they're doing, the PPE that they've bought, the protocols that they're implementing, what they're doing for staff, how staff are screened pre-shift, how customers are going to be screened pre-shift, what to expect on the phone from your appointment booking, what to expect when you get in the treatment room. That communication is going to be super vital in helping to restore your customer confidence in what you have to offer. And that customer confidence is what we need as industry, because as industry at large, we need those customers back through our doors in order to see our businesses survive and to see our industry survive. So I think that probably ties up more or less what we wanted to share with you today. I know that that's been a whirlwind 37-minute tour. I'm sure that you've probably got some questions. So Amanda, if we can have you back, perhaps you can give us an indication of any of those questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lesley and Candice. That was really, really interesting. And we've had loads of feedback on it. Just before we kind of get into the questions, I know there's a few questions where people said they missed the first 10-15 minutes of this session. It will be available on PB's Facebook page indefinitely, so you can go back and watch it. And we will also be putting it on PB's YouTube channel tomorrow morning. So don't worry if you missed the start, you can watch it again. All the info's there. And just the other thing about the July 4th date, I know everyone's absolutely dying to know, but that is an estimated date that the government gave as part of their road plan at the start when they started talking about lifting restrictions. We haven't had confirmation that July 4th is definitely going to happen, but the feeling is that Bojo is going to give us some guidance on that this week. So hopefully salons, hairdressers will have some answers this week on that. Only Northern Ireland has 100% confirmed. Wales gave July 13th as an estimate, but again, it's completely dependent on the R rate and everything else. So, you know, hopefully we'll get a bit more clarity for England this week. But Lesley and Candice, I think I'll start. I think something that's come across on the Zoom questions and Facebook, and I'll just kind of roll it into one, is everyone's asking about facials, whether you think facials are going to go ahead, and if they do, you know, what are going to be some of the challenges with that, especially if clients need to be wearing masks? I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first off, I've been doing quite a lot of work with the professional bodies, and as I said earlier in the sort of the webinar, we have actually been working quite closely with the bodies and various other groups. And the indication is that when the indication currently is that when services go live, services will go live. There is no current indication that they're going to separate things out. So there's a lot of speculation that there will be a separation and that certain services like skincare treatments will be pushed further back. But from everything that I've seen currently, there's absolutely no indication. So I think what I would say to everybody is there's always a chance that they might change their minds and come up with something, you know, hit us left field. But you should prepare, because if skincare is your major sort of profitable service, you should be preparing, because you want to be able to offer your most profitable service as soon as you possibly can. So irrespective of whether they push you out a couple of weeks, it's really only going to be a few weeks if they do push you out. So you might as well get preparing and get yourself sorted.
I think also, Amanda, just with regards to masks and customers, there are a few considerations in there as well. Customers will be able to take off their masks ultimately, place them to the side, have the treatment. But that's why when we're dealing with those very close services, that's when we will be requiring face shields to protect the therapist as well. But there will be modifications. So, for example, we're not recommending the use of steam in treatments. So, as Candice says, there's lots of thoughts about how to adjust those treatments, but getting prepared and planning now is a good plan.
Yeah, thanks, Lesley. Actually, you just answered Amita's question about steam. So, Amita, I don't know if you've seen that on Facebook, but they said that they recommend not using that for the time being. So I hope you've seen that. Something else that's come up with facials for a few questions is obviously the issue about gloves, and obviously about it feeling different in touch for clients. I mean, I guess it is going to be different, but how can therapists and salons kind of manage that until they can go back to the proper touch therapy? Because obviously we don't know how long therapists will be needing to use PPE for. I mean, how different will gloves make the treatment?
I mean, I think it is possible to use gloves. Yes, it's possible to have gloves pretty much across the board if you have to. It's not, yes, I agree, it does change the feel somewhat for the client. But I guess the question comes in as to whether, it's still a big question mark as to whether, gloves are going to be a mandated requirement. I know certainly for us, in terms of our clean touch certification and our enhanced service safety protocols, we actually, we recommend hand washing over glove use. So if the government guidelines are that you have to wear gloves, then of course we'll wear gloves. But actually, in the context of hygiene and increased sanitation protocols, the surfactants in cleansers actually break down and deactivate viruses and bacteria. So hand washing is still the preferred method. And actually, our clean touch protocols, we worked in collaboration with an epidemiologist and several doctors to develop our protocols. So we didn't sort of just make them up in isolation. We actually did a lot of consultation, and the agreed sort of course of action is that hand washing comes out trumps time and time again. And you'll see that that's actually the lead government guidance. So I would say that, yes, if they come out with the fact that we now need to wear hand, sort of gloves for all hands-on services, we will modify and adapt. But I think it's highly likely that they will take the main line that they have taken throughout this pandemic, which is around hand washing. So if you didn't use PPE previously for a service, then it's highly unlikely that you will necessarily need to wear that PPE in forward service, unless we're talking about something related around respiratory, because it's a respiratory virus. So then it's about face coverings and face shields.
Did you have anything to add to that, Lesley?
No, I didn't. No, not necessarily. Nothing. Yeah.
And while we're talking about facials, because the comments are kind of flooding through, because I think for a lot of people it's a real bread and butter service. Lisa on Zoom has asked, hot towels included, can we use these or not in facials? And also Sue on Facebook has asked whether they can use forced ventilation when performing a facial treatment.
Les, do you want to take it?
Yeah, as far as hot towels go, they're fine. I think the thing is, you have to make sure that when you're finished with using them, that they're placed into a receptacle that's closed. So we can't leave anything just placed. I know sometimes professional skin therapists might use a hot towel and then throw it under the bed or drop it on the trolley or whatever the case may be. But actually, we need to have very clearly marked out receptacles, so that we can place these things, put the lid back on. I'm sorry, I didn't get the second question there, Amanda.
Second question was about whether you can use forced ventilation in a treatment room.
I don't have an opinion on that. Do you?
I'm not familiar with forced ventilation, but I think if you're talking about things like oxygen services, things around using air, then I would say you need to be very, very careful, because anything that increases the sort of distribution of breath has an impact. And if you're starting to blow things around, bearing in mind, yes, you are going to have a shield, but that shield is not completely sealed. So if you were doing any kind of service that creates dispersion of someone's breath, whether that's steam, oxygen, or anything like that, then it's really not recommended at this stage.
Yeah, Sue's just replied actually saying that she's talking about using fans in the treatment room. Okay. So I guess that would apply to sort of what you've just said. It's about redistributing the air, isn't it? So it would be a no-no. I guess you'd prefer open windows.
Yes.
Natural ventilation.
Absolutely.
So I hope that's helped, Sue. There's so many questions coming in about different treatments. So I'm just going to try and go through them. Some people have been asking about whether you think treatments, advanced treatments like microdermabrasion, will be affected. Kerry on Facebook said, I heard there's higher risk because of the machines and the method of delivery, etc. Do you think there'll be an issue with performing those kind of treatments?
There's a probability, but I don't think at this stage we've been given any indication that some of those services are going to be withheld. So as I said earlier, everything that I've understood to this point indicates that when we switch on, we're going to be able to switch on, and we can be able to move forward from there. But yeah, I mean, this is the frustration, isn't it? Until the government actually give us some clear information, it's mostly speculation.
Yeah. I think probably with any of those devices, it would be, you know, the same kind of process of however the manufacturer recommends we clean them, we sanitize them between every single customer. We just have to be extra fastidious with it. So like Candice says, when we get that guidance, then yeah, we will hopefully be able to move forward with them. But then it's planning and making sure that we're absolutely performing those hygiene practices around that service and having a plan for what that looks like.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Sarah on Facebook has also asked, if a client comes in for massage, should they pop their clothes into a bag? She said she went to visit her dentist and she was not allowed to take her handbag into the room with her. So she's assuming that minimal items will be allowed in the therapy room.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be our recommendation. So our recommendation is that actually you should be pre-warning your clients what the process or the procedure is. So the less things they bring with them, the better, because ultimately every additional thing is another thing that's a potential, you know, carrier or risk. So our recommendations are that the client should have some sort of bag. So if they are changing into a gown or some kind of robe, that there should be a clear, you know, a disposable bag that they can put their articles of clothing in, as opposed to just hanging them on the backs of doors or hanging them in a locker. They need to be in something so that there's that extra level of protection, and then they can, you know, change back into their clothing at the end of service, and you can literally discard that bag and throw that bag away.
And somebody else on Facebook just said they missed the part that you said about staff changing clothes. They were just asking if you could quickly repeat that.
Yeah, so what we're recommending is that our staff don't arrive or travel in their uniform. So they should have their uniform packed in a separate bag. They come into the business in their own clothing, and then they need to change. They need to change out of their clothing that they've been traveling in into their uniform. Obviously, there'll be additional things they might need to have, like an apron, for example. And then at the end of the day, do the same process, get unchanged. The bag that we're recommending for our teams is a washable bag, so that literally they can get home and they can pop that all into the washing machine, bag, uniform. We are going with washable gowns as well, just to be a little bit more environmentally friendly. And that will be all washed and then ready for the next day, clean uniform every single day that they come in. Did I miss anything, Candice?
I don't think so.
Thank you. I hope that's answered your question on Facebook. We had another one about, do you have any idea what sterilisation will need to be in place for tools that are used in salon?
I think it will be your standard sterilization. So, you know, if what we would say is whatever sterilizing or disinfecting products or processes you are using, check back with your manufacturers that you are using them correctly. But so long as you are using an approved biocide, approved sanitizing or disinfecting method, those are adequate. I think the difference in the COVID situation is that you are increasing the number of times you are sanitizing other areas as well. So it's not just your tools and things, but it's making sure that hard surfaces and hard touch surfaces, door handles, you know, counters that are constantly used, those have to be sanitized more regularly in case someone puts their hand down and deposits a little virus residue there. So there's a little bit of additional sanitation, but in terms of your tools and the things that you're used to doing, that should remain pretty much standard. It's just that you might be doing it slightly more frequently.
Cool. And Ruth on Zoom has asked a question about nail services. She said, my question please, nail varnish, base coat and top coat, should we ask clients to provide their own, as I'm presuming that we can't use these from one client to another?
Wow, good question. Yeah, I can't say that because we're not specifically a nail service. I'm not really sure what nail service companies are recommending. So maybe the best option there is to contact whoever your nail product providers are and to get guidance from them and see what they're recommending in terms of nails.
Yeah, I haven't heard too much about nail services particularly, but I guess maybe this is something that will be addressed when we get official guidance, because obviously that idea of reuse on different people. So we will try and keep you updated on that, Ruth. And if we get some answers, you know, we'll post it out on the website. People are also asking about touch therapies like massages and whether only certain types of massages will be allowed to be performed when reopened. Have you guys heard anything like that from the professional bodies, whether the massage times would be cut down or whether it'd only be like a back massage because the face is away?
No, I think the sort of general premise is that the longer you are in contact with somebody, the higher your probability of increased viral load. So you know, that's sort of the key thing with COVID-19 is how long are you in contact with somebody who is potentially a carrier, and the longer you're in contact with them, the higher your risk of contracting the virus. So there's been a lot of conversation about whether, you know, you should just offer shorter services versus longer services, because in the context of shorter services you reduce the amount of time that you spend with that person. But the counter argument to that is, if you make lots of short services, you're exposed to many more people. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation. It's a bit of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. So do you increase your risk by exposing yourself to more people, or do you increase your risk by being with less people but for longer? And I don't think there is a clear, straight answer to that question. So from our experience, we haven't heard that specific recommendation to do shorter services in place of. I think that's something that you have to weigh up as a business as to what do you think is the most business viable solution for you. So in other words, which services are your most profitable, and how does that look in terms of how long you spend with a client and how many clients you intend to see to make keeping your doors open viable. And I think you have to weigh that up in the conversation.
Cool. Did you have anything to add to that, Lesley?
No, I completely agree.
Ruth, just to let you know, Sarah on Facebook has commented and said that Doug Schoon has said the virus can't survive in nail products. So it's probably worth giving that a Google and looking at what he said. So thanks for sharing that, Sarah. That's what I love about social media. People can share all the good info. Another question that's come through, I'm just trying to pile in as many as we've got for this last 6 minutes, guys. Do we need minimum time for sanitizing for each room or session area before the next clients are entering? So what's the kind of recommended time you would book in for cleaning in between appointments?
Yeah, we've been recommending about half an hour. So we've been saying a half an hour block, so not having customers back to back. As we said earlier, we may get that down to about 20 minutes, but I think for now that's allowing that time to be able to go through everything thoroughly is important. And also to think about, like Candice was saying earlier, about how many people are walking in and out of the business. So you need a bit of time, distance. My experience this morning of the dentist too was I only got the phone call to say I could go into the business when they were ready to receive me. So based on the size of the business, you may be waiting to, for customers to leave, you to clean, and then to have people come in. So for now, we would say about half an hour.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think, understandably, I'm sure some business owners are, squirming in their seat at the concept of a dead 30 minutes in the column after every client. But I think the reality of that is you are aiming for your staff to be more efficient, but you can't be more efficient to the detriment of the standard. So you must make sure that absolutely the room is of a hygiene standard that makes it safe for the client to come in. And if you are using lots of sanitation and cleaning products, you probably also want just a couple of minutes for that, for the ventilation, to make sure that the room is comfortable for somebody to come into, that it doesn't smell of high concentrated cleaning disinfectant, because that equally doesn't provide the best experience for the customer, because the customers coming into our types of environments expect a slightly different experience, and we still want to have that positive, warm skincare, health, well-being type of environment and experience. So I think it's a combination of a couple of things there, but I think you should be aiming for around about 20 minutes. If you can get it down to 15, amazing, but don't do it at 15 to the compromise of the standard. And so, as Lesley says, you're better off in the initial part of going back and opening, allowing that 30-minute window, because then you've got enough time, and as you progress through the weeks, you can shave that down.
Yeah. And I think a lot of these things now are not necessarily about how things will be forever. Hopefully things will improve. So, don't feel too apprehensive or nervous about giving up that time, because it might be that this is only for the next month or so, or the next, 6 weeks, or however long. And that's the difficulty with the situation, is it's constantly evolving and changing.
And we've had a couple of questions about thoughts of adding money onto treatments to cover the costs of PPE. What do you guys think?
I'll let you cover that, Can, because you touched on that earlier.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely a route that we think you should consider. I think it comes down to your profitability, and making sure that you cover yourself, because there's no point in opening your doors or providing services if you're not making the money back. It needs to be financially and commercially sound. So, I mean, if you are having questions about whether you should increase the cost, and if you do have an accountant, maybe it's a conversation you want to have with your accountant to say, how does this stack up in terms of, my cash flow, my bottom line, my profitability at the end of it all. So, we would encourage you to do that. Certainly from our point of view, we would say you have to consider it. There's no right or wrong answer, but you must consider it and think carefully about, what the cost implications are to you.
Yeah, and actually, anybody who's watching, pardon me, we actually had a webinar with a salon consultant called Jessica Crane a couple of weeks ago, and she was talking about whether this is the time to actually do a price increase in your business in general, or whether you put in a temporary surcharge for this time where social distancing and PPE measures are in place, and about working out what route is best for your business. So it's definitely worth looking into that and seeing which route you want to go down, because it really depends on your business's own numbers. But yeah, we'll just try and get one more question in before we go. There's been lots of questions about different things. There's been quite a few about facial threading, because obviously sometimes when people are using the threads as well, sometimes put them in their mouths and things like that. Is facial threading just a no-no for the moment, or will it be a case that it just needs to be performed slightly differently?
My gut instinct is that it's probably a high-risk treatment at this point in time. Yeah, I mean, I think we'll have to wait to see what the actual guidance says. I wonder, I'm hoping that the professional bodies would have flagged that in the consultation process. But given that this is a respiratory virus, yeah, that's pretty high risk, because you know, Les and I were talking earlier and just saying that a lot of these measures that we're putting into place, yes, they're about the client, yes, they're about the staff member, but it's, you know, it's not just about passing on from someone who's ill. This is actually about somebody who you don't even know is ill. So someone who's asymptomatic and coming into the business, whether that's a staff member or a client, and you're going to do all the screening processes to try and minimize that and avoid the, you know, reduce the risk of that. But the bottom line of it is a high proportion of people are asymptomatic. And so if you're having services like threading, I think that might, in the initial stages, it doesn't mean forever, but in the initial stages, that sounds like a high risk treatment.
Yeah, and I'm just going to try and squeeze in 2 questions into one very quickly, just again, because they come through quite differently on Facebook. And people are asking whether you can work in a room with no windows, or whether you can work in a room and have the air conditioning on.
Yeah, I mean, I think air conditioning, so as long as your air conditioning is serviced, you know, I certainly think that if you're going back into the business and you haven't had your air conditioning serviced, you should. That should be part and parcel of your deep clean process. You know, you need to, there's lots of things, you know, you don't want to have issues with Legionnaires, you've got to run your water, you've got to service your air conditioning, you've got to do your deep clean. So it's not just a case of, oh, the doors have been locked for 3 months, we're going to walk back in and we're going to start doing treatments. You need to make sure that that entire treatment space is completely safe. I don't necessarily think that it's a complete no-no to do a treatment in a room that doesn't have natural windows. Of course, the more fresh air that you get through the room and the business is better, because it helps to ventilate and it reduces that viral load, which is the whole point. It's sort of, you know, make sure that we're getting a clearing out of any virus that might be in the air. Perhaps if you are concerned about it, you can consider whether you air your room for a period of time. So after your sanitation process, you might choose to leave your door open and have a short period of time that the air can circulate. But it, you know, I think it would be crazy to say that you can't work at all under the circumstances, because there's going to be lots of different varied circumstances. It's just about making a small modification to make sure that you allow for some ventilation in the area.
Cool. Well, Lesley and Candice, thank you so much. I feel like you've been on question time or something. The amount of questions I've posed to you guys. But no, it's been so interesting. It's been really informative. I think everybody who's been watching it, they've been saying thank you, because I think everyone just wants some guidance, and it's good to talk about these things, isn't it? Because everyone's worrying about it. So it's nice to have a forum to do it. But thank you so much for doing today. We really appreciate it. And yeah, for anybody who joined late, this webinar is sponsored by Dermalogica, and Dermalogica has a clean touch certificate, which all skin therapists can complete, even non-Dermalogica stockists. And it's basically free training on the brand's new principles of enhanced service safety. So everyone who learns these principles will become Dermalogica Clean Touch certified, which means that you promise to uphold the brand's highest standards in safety and sanitation, which you can hang in your window and show to clients and really give them that reassurance when they come in.
And just to say, Amanda, and it's just sort of to tag on to that, I just want to say to everybody, you know, Dermalogica has a massive campaign planned to go out and shout from the rooftops that, you know, skin therapists are out there, and you know, local skin therapists need the local community support. These businesses need to get back on their feet, and we're ready and waiting. So we will be shouting loud and clear about getting back in touch, and also about those businesses that are Clean Touch certified, so that customers can feel confident to come back into those businesses.
Brilliant. So yeah, and there's a link in the comment box on Zoom and on Facebook as well, where you can go find out a lot more about this Clean Touch certificate. But that's all we have time for today. We do have another webinar tomorrow, which if you're a home-based or a freelance mobile beauty business, it's all about money management when you're self-employed and you own that kind of business. So if that's you, make sure to check it out. But thank you so much, Lesley. Thank you so much, Candice.
Thank you for having us.
I hope you're all safe, and hopefully we'll get a bit more clarity this week from the government, which would be great. But have a nice day, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.
See you soon. Bye.